Okay, well, I'm interrupting golf to try and address the latest issue, which is my question to Peggy about why she won't listen to Mitt Romney. We've had this conversation before. Frankly, Peggy, I'm surprised you're asking, what do you mean, Bill? Okay, so here it is. We discussed before. I didn't understand because Mitt Romney is so firmly against Donald Trump. And you said something to the effect of, I don't always agree with Mitt Romney. So my question is, how do you know more than Mitt Romney? Mitt Romney has been in the US Senate for how long? Okay. So I just want to try this video thing and see if it works. So I don't think you guys see everything. I think you guys watch whatever you watch, or you have Twitter headlines or whatever, but I watch everything, probably to my own detriment. But I mean, Newsmax, OEM, however much I can stomach of that. But so I'm trying to find one source that you guys will listen to about the dangers of Donald Trump becoming the next president. So I called through and I recorded this one that I thought was pretty. He talks about Trump, he talks about Hunter Biden and Biden, because some of you are convinced that Biden is guilty, even though there's really no proof of anything. I mean, the whole impeachment inquiry was stupid. So this interview is going into the impeachment inquiry, so it's a couple months old, a few months old. So anyway, watch this, and then once you watch it, answer the question: how do you know more than Mitt Romney? And if you don't agree with Mitt Romney, then you have to say that Mitt Romney is being disingenuous. He's being dishonest because he has a lot more information than you and I have. So what is it that you think he's hiding? Why would Mitt Romney be disingenuous about this? Why would he not support the Republican candidate for president? What does he have personally to gain? Anyway, watch it and let me know why you don't think he's right.
Let's turn to those comments that we just played by former President Donald Trump. As you heard, he said he would not be a dictator except for day one. At an event in New York last night, he tried to downplay that. But what was your reaction to hearing those words, Senator? Do you believe him?
You know, when I was a kid, there was something called a gumball machine. You could put a penny in and a gumball would come out. It was automatic. There was no filter. Put in the penny, out came the gumball. Donald Trump is kind of a human gumball machine, which is a thought or a notion comes in and it comes out of his mouth. There's not a lot of filter that goes on. There's not a lot of what's the implication. No, he just says whatever. I don't attach an enormous amount of impact to the particular words that come out and try and evaluate each one of them. I do think you can look at his record as president, and particularly in the last months of his presidency, and say, this is a dangerous approach, it's an authoritarian approach. That gives me far more concern than him playing to the crowd as he did.
Well, given that you're saying he gives these unfiltered responses, we have actually seen him do what he says he's going to do. When he said that he believed the election was going to be rigged before people actually went to the polls, he went on to question the results, tried to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Why don't you take him exactly at his word?
Oh, I think we agree that we have looked at his behavior, and his behavior suggests that this is a person who will impose his will, if he can, on the judicial system, on the legislative branch, and on the entire nation. I mean, when he called people to come to Washington, D.C. on January 6th, that was not a random date. That was the date when peaceful transfer of power was to occur. He called that on purpose. I mean, there's no question he has authoritarian rulings and interests and notions which he will try and impose. That's dangerous for the country. It was dangerous then. Life was lost. We were embarrassed around the world. I mean, this was a tragedy. And a number of the things he did in the last months of his presidency suggest what he'd do if he were elected again.
I want to drill down on you on just how dangerous, as you say, you perceive former President Trump to be. Liz Cheney put this into dire terms this week. She told my colleague Savannah Guthrie, quote, "There's no question Trump would refuse to leave office if he's reelected." She went so far as to say a vote for him may mean the last election that you ever get to vote in. Do you agree with that assessment?
I don't think Donald Trump would want to stay in longer than 4 years. And the reason I say that is because I think he's running for retribution, and I think he will have finished his retribution after 4 years if he's elected. I don't think he particularly likes being around the White House. I think he'd rather be back at Mar-a-Lago or other properties of his. But he wants to show that he's not a loser. He won, and he wants to go after the people who were tough on him. So I think he'll be finished after 4 years and go back to other occupations.
Given everything that we have heard from former President Trump, what do you think a second Trump term would look like?
Well, I think if you can look at the last few months of his presidency, you'd suggest that that's the kind of thing you might see, that he would not have the generals around him as he did last time, people of judgment and experience offering advice, and in some cases restraining his impulses. Instead, he would have people around him encouraging his impulses and perhaps adding to them. And I'm afraid you'd find the nation more divided. Look, our nation doesn't need to be divided right now. A campaign based on anger and hate may win at the ballot box temporarily, but it tears the country apart. The other day, the former president said that we are at greater threat for what is within. I think that was in some respects a self-own, because what's within, if he were to become elected president again, is a campaign of retribution and anger and hate. That's not what America is based on. America was based on the idea of in God we trust and united we stand. Divided we fall. Divided nation is not the nation America is intended to be.
All right, well, let's move on to Hunter Biden and the headlines around that. As you know, he was indicted on 9 new tax charges this week, the second time he has been indicted by the special counsel this year alone. His lawyers said that if his name was anything other than Biden, the charges would not have been brought. What's your reaction to that?
Well, if his name were anything other than Biden, he wouldn't have been able to bilk millions of dollars from foreign entities. So let's start there. And not only did he take all this money from foreign entities, trading on his father's name, which is ugly and unsavory, he then didn't pay taxes on it, according to the prosecutors. We'll see if they can prove that case. But if they can, he violated U.S. law and should be severely punished for having done so.
As you know, House Republicans have signaled that they may vote as early as this week on an impeachment inquiry into President Biden, despite the fact that they haven't shown yet a direct link between Hunter Biden's business dealings and President Biden. Have you seen any evidence that President Biden has committed high crimes and misdemeanors?
No, I don't see any evidence of that at all. I think before you begin an impeachment inquiry, you ought to have some evidence, some inclination that there's been wrongdoing, and so far there's nothing of that nature that's been provided.
So are you opposed to the impeachment inquiry?
Well, if I were in the House, I'd vote against it, unless they were able to bring forward evidence that suggests that there were a high crime or misdemeanor that had been committed. But so far, that hasn't been the case. Look, fortunately, for most people, we're not responsible for the misdeeds of our kids and grandkids and great-grandkids. Nothing in my family I'm embarrassed about. But President Biden's son, Hunter, is obviously been a very unsavory person and has had some extremely damaging personal foibles, including a drug habit and so forth. That's not President Biden, and we're not going to impeach someone because of the sins of their kids.
Okay. Let's talk about that aid package.